I gave that up. I had a whole like, I'm going to ask you these questions. And clearly that's not how our conversations work. So I'm letting them be how they are, you know?
All right. Well, cool.
Yeah. Hello, hello, and welcome to KeyBARD. I am Thembi, bringing you compelling conversations and content about technology, education, and the arts. If money were no object, what kind of art would you create? If time and space were yours to use freely, what stories would you tell? What art would you make? In American theater, these are questions that artists rarely, if ever, get the chance to fully explore. Because, well, capitalism, where the elusive concept of marketability reigns, and the biggest budgets typically don't find their way to the most daring artists or deepest thinkers. In American theater, the most visible, most funded work seldom investigates the human condition in a meaningful way. Actor and playwright Keith Hamilton Cobb knows this firsthand, but more importantly, he knows that great art isn't just about access, it's about intention, vulnerability, doing the work and taking the time to dig deeper in spite of the given circumstances. This is what led to his creation of the award-winning play American Moor. In part 2 of our conversation, we talk about the structures that shape American theater, the forces that determine who gets to experiment, and why curiosity, the kind that challenges, disrupts, and refuses to settle, is becoming rarer and rarer in our culture. Stay with me. Keith Hamilton Cobb is up next. One of the things that I find interesting about our conversation before is just the nature of theater in the United States of America, how it is versus how it could be, how we imagine it to be, how you imagine it to be, how I, things that I hear you say that I agree with. And the fact that there are people like you demonstrating that there's another way to do it, not the rushing, not the phoning it in, not the complete lack of due diligence in terms of research and digging into exploration of character and text and the connection to the human condition, but really doing something meaningful with the work and being in conversation with the work, I think was a really important theme of our discussion last time.
Yeah. You say a lot of people like me.
Mm-hmm.
And I
did I say a lot? I don't know. People like you. There's not a lot of y'all.
People, you might not have said a lot, but
there's not a lot.
I wonder, they're all sort of trees falling in a forest that nobody hears, right? They're all people out there doing this thing because there's probably a difference between those who continue to return to a deeper relationship with all of their theatrical work and those who are doing that because somebody has not funded them going down some other road, and that may be a bit of a jaded view. But you take somebody like Ivo van Hove, right, who's directed, maybe it's Hove, it's I think it's Van Hove. He's been sort of the go-to avant-garde director on Broadway for the past 15 years. He directed The Crucible, he directed Network, he directed this revisionist debacle most recently of West Side Story. And what they allow these European directors of note, why they have note is another question, but these European directors of note is scale, right? They say, come, we'll give you the biggest theater, we'll give you the biggest budget, we'll give you 40, 50 actors, and you'll do this thing, and we'll sell it to the American public because it's Ivo van Hove doing whatever. And he will come because they gave it to him, and he will masturbate all over a thing. And people will come and say, isn't that lovely, masturbation? Isn't that lovely how he came all over that? I'm being graphic for a reason, because that sells, right? European genius still sells to we descendants of Europe. We this country descendants of Europe, where the white structure still wants to reach back and say we are connected to that wonderful art, that wonderful evolution in music and painting and theater, and we are, to the exclusion of other voices to a certain extent. And if any of us, if I or any of these people who you generously say, are doing the work, were handed those kinds of budgets, that kind of support, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would we continue to dig deeply and innovate and create things that really were hyper relevant because they were new and from the mind of, if not non-white people, certainly people digging that deeply for the first time? Or would we just start to live good lives and make stuff because we had been anointed? I mean, certainly even today, if you have a Black director, Kenny Leon is not the only Black director in America, but he's the only one that gets to direct regularly on Broadway, right? He's the anointed for now. And this is all the layers of our money-driven, capitalist-driven bullshit that doesn't, and we don't discuss it. We don't do serious criticism about it. We don't have in-depth discussions about what we could. I mean, you and I are having one, but we don't have in-depth discussions about how this isn't particularly the best way to something that is truly nourishing of a culture. Those
Let me ask you.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Those discussions take too long, and they're inconvenient, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we just do this. It seems to be making some people money. And
Yeah, well, okay. I have something else to say, but just to respond to what you just said, you said those discussions take too long. That's what's so interesting to me, because when I have conversations with people and it's, people are rushing to hurry up and do this project because this other project is on deck and this other project is wrapping up, and it's just the act of doing, and it's not a process. It's a revolving
you're feeding the market.
Steps.
It's stuff.
Right.
It's right. You're making product.
Right. So we're not talking about, hey, we're at this stage of the development of an idea. And at that stage of the development of idea, it's like, did you get me these things? Did you get me those? Okay, well, you need to get me that. It's logistical, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting because you're right. The idea is there's no time for it, but there's only time for what we create time for. Instead of doing 10 shows at once, you could do one show for all of that time, and you really would direct something that was meaningful and relevant. At least you had the opportunity to dig deep with one project. But of course, like to your point, it doesn't feed the capitalist machine. And the question becomes, what if this existed outside of the capitalist machine? We've decided that it has to fit inside. And I just wonder if there's an opportunity for it to fit outside. And I just wonder when you said earlier, if someone else who was interested in digging deep or who's been digging deep recently had bestowed upon them all of this funding and all of this space and access to all of these particular performers, would they then just become a worshiper of capitalist culture? I argue that resources, obviously this isn't to the person, but I would like to offer that resources just amplify who you are. And if you are already thinking of the work in a certain way, then resources would just allow you to go even deeper in the direction that you're going. I feel like people who are not interested in a deeper exploration of whatever the subject matter is that's at hand here, or whatever it is that, is in development, they're just not going to, regardless of resources. There's certain things, certain people just want to see spectacle. And whether it's small scale spectacle or large scale spectacle, it's just interesting to me. I don't feel like if you were given a whole bunch of resources that you would stop doing what you were doing. I think that you would clone it, you would multiply it, and you would create these opportunities for other people to experience this deep discussion. But I'm not inside your head. Maybe you would start, just being like, whatever, and just doing big spectacles just for fun and kind of getting to this self-congratulatory space. But You could have gotten the resources. All you had to do was play the game. You're the one who chose not to play the game. You know what I mean? And you did it because you decided that playing the game wasn't something that you could look in the mirror and see yourself doing.
I think
I'm
I
just
think what
saying.
yeah, I think what you say is half true. We
Okay.
we don't know until so much of the work that we do with Project Untitled is looking at the human being, whether it be the human being within the text or the human being looking at the text, because they're the same person, right? So if somebody says to me, I played, I'm a good actor, I studied hard so I can play that racist really well. I say to them, you know, no, as long as you're playing the racist and not looking at the racism within yourself, you're not doing the work, because once you get in touch with that, you can stop acting, right? You can just show up and be that person, but you're so busy trying to deny that that's you, right? That you are the ugly, dirty, grotesque human being that we all are, that are destroying the planet, that consume and make babies and consume some more, right? That's what we do at the base, and that's not different than any other creature on the planet. So looking at that, always looking at the human being, my tendency is to think, I don't know. I think the human thing that I see people doing more than not when given extreme resources is changing to enjoy those resources. That's why we see actors get fat, right? Russell Crowe wasn't fat when he came to Hollywood, right? Good Life does that, right?
The
Good Life,
king's
you get to hang
disease.
out. You ain't hungry no more.
Right, right,
Right? And if
right.
that good life keeps coming, they're just going to change. They want to keep putting you in movies, so they're just going to change the role. Get fat guys. We got stuff about fat guys that we can give Russell Crowe, so he don't have to do nothing but be, yeah, and that's a hell of a life. Now Russell Crowe may not have ever wanted to do anything else, you know. Um, does if you're handing Robert Wilson a gazillion dollars, and they do it in every country in Europe, get Robert Wilson so he can make, his multi-million-dollar opera around, I don't know, Tannhauser or La Boheme or whatever. Um, these big sweeping avant-garde things that he now just gets to do because, like Van Hove, he's the go-to guy. At one point, he was probably looking at some things, right? He was probably looking at
Mm-hmm.
some things as an artist and saying, I want to explore this more deeply. And one of them took hold, and all of a sudden he turned around and people are throwing money at him. Is the work as good, or is he taking it to do these things just because he can do them? And that's the question for all of us. And we won't know until we're in that situation. I'd like to think that I would continue to make good work, and it would only be enhanced by having the support. Certainly in Project Untitled and the Untitled Othello project, we are stifled, we are hindered by the lack of momentum that we are unable to build because we do not have the resource to do this more full time. And the thing that allows us all to do that is the thing that we all, the human being, needs, and that's money to just go home and be the person who consumes and makes babies. You know.
Wait a second. I thought you were going somewhere else with that. The money to
uh,
what about the money
uh,
to ask the big human questions? Do you believe that we as
I,
humans
I, I,
don't
I,
want to
I,
ask those questions?
I think you're talking about intellectual curiosity, which I
Yes.
think is more and more lacking in the American culture. I think less and less people ask those questions, and I think the internet has caused that. I think that the digital culture has caused that. I think that the attention deficit that is caused by the phone, looking at the phone, and all of the immediate gratification, visual gratification of whatever, the salesmanship that is inherent in all of that, that has turned us, into something else.
Never
Um,
to return to anything
we can
better or never to move towards anything better?
well, Thembi, I think evolution happens irrespective of us, right? It takes us wherever it takes us, given what we're doing, right? So when evolution is happening, right, we go through a period and we become something else, right? The trend, the historical trends, the cultural trends take us in a direction, and we don't have any ability to step outside them and look at them. We just kind of go there, and we find ourselves where we are right now because life just sort of went there.
Yeah.
After the dot-com boom, life just went there, and now we're in this place. It has caused all kinds of detriment. It has caused good, but it's caused all kinds of hardship, including the divisiveness of this current electoral season, right? And what that is, and the size of it, and the shape of it, right? Where people are making money off of pitting people's views against one another, creating hatred, right? Hatred sells.
Yeah.
Hatred makes lots of money, right? And why would a human being say, let me make money off of these people's hatred? Because she decided that their need for the money is bigger than, right? It's completely irrational. Yeah. It is on the base human level of survival. I am going to create a wall of money between me and my family and the world, because that seems to be the only thing that is truly protective. I can throw money at almost anything, right? Even cancer, which can't be cured, right? You're going to live longer if you got money to throw at it than if you po, mm-hmm. right? So I got money to fly to Switzerland and get the best doctor, get the best body transplant, you know what I'm saying? So I think the proclivity for the human being is still, at the end of the day, be rich, right? Now, artists say, yeah, be rich so you can make bigger art.
I mean, that cut to the quick.
Well, that's what I was always like. People would ask me, I would sit in LA in my big 2-car garage that I didn't need to put a car in there. So I had all this woodworking equipment. I was making things up, furniture out of wood and found metal and really cool, big whacking pieces of art. And people would say, well, you can market this, you can sell this. And I said, I don't know nothing about that. I don't want to market anything. I just want to make it. I don't want to go on the internet and create a site that, I don't want to get up Instagram. You like that table? Take it. It's for you. It's there. I mean, what the hell am I going to do with it? Right. Mm-hmm. Take it. And they would say, well, what do you want to do? And I'd say, well, I like the idea of being able to, how the internet works for me is I can go on eBay and find some farmer with a slab of oak that he cut out of a tree that's like this perfect thing in like Minnesota, and say, ship me that, mm-hmm. right? And pay the money, and that'll show up at my door, and I can make a thing out of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if somebody gave me money for that, then I could make another thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess you could say I want to make art that makes me sufficient money to live well, which is to say, not be worrying about the bill's going to get paid this month. Is the dog going to have food?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to be able to pay my bills, the vet bills? Do I have health care? The things that people just generally need.
Okay.
And enough to buy the next piece of wood that is significant, because I gotta get it shipped from Minnesota,
And you have to spend money to create your art. So yeah.
Right. So that's me, I mean, that's what I'd like to do. It's never worked out quite that way, but it's still what I'd like to do. The thing I can't do is be somebody else's piece of the machine, to be the person who, when you call AT&T, they say, we'll give you customer service, and they put you in touch with this person in Bangladesh working for nothing, who barely speaks English, right? But has been given his job, right, by some non-integral human being who thinks it's all right to treat you, the customer, like this. So all of this for diminutions of integrity, and using you because you are the one in need. You have to make the choice to be a piece of that, to play that. That I could never do.
Is that coming from a place of privilege, though, Keith? Is that coming from a place of knowing that you have things already that other people don't have, and that you can monetize those things and survive?
Well, I haven't monetized much, Thembi, I'll tell you.
Okay.
most of my money has come from being an actor on the hoof, right? Saying, I want to be an actor, pay me, and there hasn't been that much of that. I have some situations with family and resources, as in a particular place in America, that helps. So certainly there are blessings, but I don't think that it's a disingenuous overstatement to say that I would sooner die than be feeding myself by doing something that I don't believe in for another person who's just using me as that piece of the proletariat, right? That piece of the capitalist machine where you have need, we've got money. So if you want to do this thing, like it or hate it, and don't matter to me. It's this thing. This thing will pay you for me, not for you, not for anything it offers to the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just to fill that need, just to keep you alive. Well, I'd rather be dead. If that's all life was about, I'd rather be dead.
How did you come to even know that you felt that way?
I guess just live in it. This has not been, I mean, when you look at theatrical and television film careers, mine is not, you look at these people who have had these wonderful careers who we're watching now. I see these people, who are now going gray and playing old men like Sean Penn, who we saw come along when they were, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, or the generation before that, who we hear, James Caan died. And I'm like, what, died? James Caan don't die. What do you mean he died?
Mm-hmm.
And you think about the lives of these people, how they've been able to age in front of the camera and have these varied and interesting careers, and live on them, create wealth. And that happens to a precious few in our country, in our culture. And it hasn't happened to me. Right? It's still what I would love to do, what I do love to do, to show up and in the work and have a life in the work. But the experience has been that, not only is that a rare thing for anybody, but it has also been uniquely unusual because Keith is Keith, right? Because Keith is this large, self-affirming Black man who comes to the table in a certain way, who doesn't have a whole lot of space for small talk, who can't really lie about how he feels about things. He can keep his mouth shut, but if you ask him, he can't. I don't. I've seen that personality of mine be off-putting for all sorts of people in the industry. I also found that I was never a good auditioner, that I could never get past my own sense of indignation at having to audition after a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, haven't I done this enough? Haven't I proved myself enough? Can't you see that I have value? Right.
Yeah, you should be offer only under all circumstances.
Right. Well, it's not that at all.
So but I understand though. I understand why you would feel like that's offensive for someone to say, "Oh, can you audition for this?"
And so, the only thing to do is to make stuff that nobody else has power over. The only thing that's missing is money to make it big and fully and full time.
Does it have to be big? I mean, full time, I understand, but does it have to be big?
Well, no. I can sit here and write a poem after I get off the phone with you, and there it is, right?
Yeah.
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 So, I mean, there's a tree falling in the forest, right?
Right.
Oh, I can do that all day long. I mean, I'm sure I do. And
it would still be a poem, but
be.
theater does require an audience to be theater.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I don't know what will shift, American Moor is having a production in Philadelphia that is the first one nationally that I'm not in.
How's that feel?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's time, right? I think we talked a little bit about this in our last session. I had held on to the rights for a long time because I thought that the best way to rebuild the momentum that it was having prior to COVID was to keep a hold of the definitive production so that there wasn't every Joe and Mo out there doing their own version of this work. And an adverse result of that was that the heat curve kind of went off the other end, right? People forget it's a thing. It wasn't that visible even when it was in New York. It was as we talked about, it was mishandled. A lot of New York never knew it was there. A lot of people don't know what it is. It has had an extraordinary life in academia, and probably would continue to have a life in regional theaters. But people have to. It's a hard play. It's not an easy play to do. It's not an easy play to understand, right? Especially if you're picking it up for the wrong reasons, right? Which is very possible to do. We talked about that. Oh, look, two-person play. You could even do it with one person if you wanted to. Hardly any set, and I can check all my DEI boxes, right? Off we go, right?
Yeah.
That's the wrong reason
Yeah.
to do this play in a season. You've got The Music Man, 39 Steps, American Moor, Mary Poppins.
Right. Like what?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we'll see where that goes. But the work has been done, and I make myself available to anybody who reaches out and wants to have the conversation about the work. If you want to talk to me, I've offered that to these people doing it. So if you want to talk to me, your cast, yourselves, whatever, I'm available. I'm available to help you make the best version of this as you can. Beyond that, the Project Untitled is reaching out into the world and showing itself as a evolving methodology around where Shakespeare and English education meet theater making. And asking the question, are these things related? Do we all have a stake in them? Should we? How do we do this better? How do we commune to better or more newly? Is that a word? More. How do we commune to manifest these things that we are all interested in ways that have not been seen again and again and again and again? How do we do that?
Mm-hmm.
And that's proving interesting to various sectors of both the theater making and academic communities, but it's still an uphill climb. It's got no celebrity attached to it. If Denzel Washington had written American Moor, it would be on Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's as simple as that.
Yeah. Because it would be on Broadway, though, Keith, because someone would say, oh, we can sell this. People will come see this. Will people walk away with it with some depth of inquiry about the issues therein? Oh, no. Is it our responsibility to even ask that question? I don't know. But I think when you talk about the life of the piece in academia, I think that to me has the most value, not just in academia, that's where it happens to be, but I'm interested in the educational value of it. I'm interested in the fact that usually when people are interested in having any sort of conversation that's driven by an inquiry about just an intellectual curiosity, as you said, about our connection and the line that you draw from how this country came about and in its present form and what people value in terms of our connection to Europe, to the UK specifically. And even, of course, this play and its playwright coming from there as well. But I'm interested in how people in various areas of learning and with interest in learning can interact with the piece, because that's where I find it most valuable. I don't find theater makers as interested on the whole in any sort of deep intellectual inquiry as I would people who are actively seeking out learning. That to me, with those people who are not necessarily theater practitioners, but are thinkers and learners, I think would be very open to that conversation.
It's interesting. I'm hearing what you're saying, and I think, again, that you could very well be right some of the time. I can tell you from experience, one of the things that happens in the academic space, you have a project like Untitled Othello, where you're saying, okay, the text is Othello, come to the table. If your academics, come to the table. If your theater makers, come to the table. If your biologists, come to the table. If your psychologists, come to the table. We want all of you here with your voices. And academics who, specifically Shakespeare scholars or English scholars in some other stripe, tend to bring again, this very human, egoic element of I have made my life, I define myself by what I know about Shakespeare. And they'll go on in a room about something that is symbolic of, well, if you'd read Homer, Shakespeare is referring to Homer here when he has Viola say this thing, and it creates the imagery of this and this and this, which would be very relevant to this audience at this time because this is what was happening in Parliament. And I say to them, how do you play that? Right?
Mm-hmm.
How do I?
How does
You have
somebody
to?
else but you know that?
Yeah, you're here. You're here to help me, and I get
Yeah.
it, and I appreciate you. I want you here, but you have to understand that this is about us working together, and you have to understand what theater makers do, right? I'm putting a human being on the stage. I'm not putting symbolism on stage. I'm not putting, I'm not, our audience has no idea of the colloquial context that this play is written in. I am not going to get them.
No,
If
it's not
yeah,
happening.
I'm not. Or that's right. I'm not going to get that. You have 6 lines, and you've given me 3 books worth of data about those 6 lines, right? But all I've got is
Right.
6 lines,
Right.
right? That these people say, and they're supposed to be people. Shakespeare's the poet. These people are not the poet. I'm playing people, and my audience, in order to see themselves reflected, need to see people.
Mm-hmm. So what does
So
that person have to offer?
I think that person has a great deal to offer if they start with introspection. If they start with themselves as a human being, saying, what am I bringing to the table? Why am I bringing all this? Can I understand this person's point about making a theater piece? How can I shape what I know or identify what I know? What part of what I know can I identify as particularly relevant to this work? Yes, hold forth with everything you know, but then be able to play, then be able to answer the question, how do I play that? How do I use that in a living context, right? Not on the page, right? There's not going to be any test for the audience. It's not a class in Elizabethan antiquities and literature. It's a play.
Right.
It's people, and you're a people, right? You're a people, Mr. or Mrs. Scholar, right? And what you have to offer as such is I'm never going to tell you it's not important, but you're going to have to come with the ability to discuss it, not just to orate or to dissert, to tell me because this is what I have to offer because I know it. Right?
Right.
That's not enough.
Right.
Okay, now what?
So is the objective, okay, the objective here is to complete a production that includes however many performances that are enhanced by the knowledge, the experiences, the insights of the scholars. So the objective is the performance. I'm asking, can the objective be something in addition? Yes, and yes, the performance, but what if there are other objectives?
There certainly can be. First of all, there doesn't need to be a performance, right? You don't start going to
Mm-hmm.
make a play. You start saying, let's see if there's a play here worth making. Or has it all been mined and are we done? Is there nothing worth putting on a stage that we haven't all seen a million times before? Because I don't need another Hamlet. I really don't, unless you're going to show me something, that I haven't seen or show me people in ways that I haven't perceived them, teach me something about myself. And if we don't get there, the exercise is still valuable because we've come together and we've communicated around this. That is a value unto itself. Now, it's a value that is greater in academia because students can learn and grow from it and take that to the next thing that they do. You can't sell it to a theater maker, to a producer.
No. And maybe that's it.
Well,
Maybe go ahead.
nothing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I feel like maybe that's it. It's just when you're having a conversation with a theater maker, if the theater maker is living in and operating within the present context, we know that there are many challenges with the theater. We're talking regional, we're talking commercial. They each have their own unique challenges, right? And
Yeah.
structures and ways of operating, even educational theater, theater within an educational context. They all have their own mechanisms, they all have their own ways of existing. And we know that, especially in educational contexts, it's just, it's a wheel turning. In regional contexts, it's a wheel turning. Okay, we've decided that this is how many shows we do per year, and these are the different slots, and we would slot it in and figure out where to go from there. We know that educational contexts, there's not a lot of marketing done to begin with. So, in my opinion, it is a good academia. It is a good place to explore these kinds of questions because they don't spend any money on trying to sell things. They've kind of got a machine already contributing that's agreed to, right? But maybe I'm just a little hamster on a wheel of thought. But I just wonder if there's something out there that would crack this open. And maybe I'm just naive, and maybe I'm just super unrealistic, because you're right, there's a huge anti-intellectualism right now in our society, and people aren't curious. They're just trying to make sure they pay their bills. The economy's crazy. They just want to get by. And so yeah, they're going to do the customer service, because they have to, right? Not because they want to. And they don't have time or space to engage in these questions. And I'm sad about that.
So you would find that in the academic structures, they are selling something. They're selling education to anybody who will buy it. They're selling education to students. They have a product. And the product very often fits in a frame, right? Fits in a time frame. Oh, you want to be an actor? 3 years, NYU Tisch, right? Here it is. Now you're done. You're an actor now. We've trained you. You've paid us this much money. Out you go. If you take a Shakespeare course, a 101 or a 102 level course, they say, okay, this semester we're going to look at Merchant of Venice, Othello, The Tempest, and Titus Andronicus. I said, well, the semester is what? Eight weeks long? How much are you going to look at any of these? These plays are huge. But
Yeah,
again, they're thinking like everybody else in the capitalist framework,
I
right?
hear you.
How
I
do
hear
we
that.
fit a thing in this? They're not really trying. They'd be smart to, like everybody else. They'd be smart and forward thinking and progressive, to think, let's fund this thing that students can filter through for a number of years and see what they build, and we'll put our name on it. We will be able to say, we did this work. We were part of this important experiment with these people, And for that, we have to, and I think Sacred Heart is trying to do that in and around being a not a big school without a huge endowment, answering to the cultural and economic demands of the current moment. It's a lot to navigate. And it takes all of us to get out of bed in the morning and choose to disrupt the what is. And when we do it on an individual level, it very seldom has the teeth that it needs. If you can do it on the level of a group that becomes more of a movement of some sort, it's better. If it creates something that makes money that all sorts of eyes turn to, then you're there, right? It's like, oh, okay, well, yeah,
Hmm.
we all knew that was a great thing. This is the behavior of the human animal, both individually and as cumulatively, right? This is what we do. And I don't know if there's any getting around that. I don't know if there's any place where this gets better. This is just who we are. And that's not a reason to not remain optimistic about the work that you create, right? Or to take a certain satisfaction from it because you know that what you're doing is good, has value, moves other people. American Moor has changed the thought processes of a great many people. It could do it more,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It has also frightened the shit out of a whole lot of people, which is
Which
why
that's a thing.
it's yeah, it is a thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, which is why it sits in the kind of odd limbo that it sits right now, right? Because it's not like the easy stuff that you can put on Broadway and call black theater, right? And say, oh, I'm doing my part for black theater, black joy as the public commodified, you know, come see Black Joy. It's like, oh, you guys at the public know what that is. You can sell me that. Hmm. They got people coming in there doing their Black Joy. I saw Black Joy. You know, it's a mess. It's that's a really, when you really start to cognize what that's about, it's make you want to jump out a window.
Okay, Keith. So, um, you know that there are people who create projects where they or I'm loath to say it, but like a nonprofit organization. I'm only saying that because I'm giving you a framework so you can understand where I'm coming from. But they create something and it's like we create this thing because we don't want to exist anymore. We hope that we'll go out of business because we will have solved the problem that we created this entity to solve. And I want to know, in terms of the Untitled Othello project, do you see it as a project that should hopefully no longer exist, or or is it not about solving a problem? Is it about continuing a conversation? Because earlier you talked about the importance of asking yourself, okay, are we done? Have we mined this piece to the point where there's nothing else to say? Well, I hear that statement in the context of a group of people. You and I and Becky Sue and Jamal and Luke Kim
Mm.
and Hasim. We have this conversation and we ask each other and ourselves, have we understood all there is to understand about Othello and about what this piece means? But if I go into a separate room 2 blocks down and have a conversation with 5 other people, the conversation is going to be different. So does it mean that this piece needs to continue in a traveling structure? Because because the conversations that happen can't happen in a town hall with 57 people. They have to be between 5 people or 2 people. And then those people go out. When I have conversations with you, I go, okay, Keith, this was wonderful. Now I'm going to go direct this show over here. I'm taking what we talked about with me into rehearsals. I'm taking it into my choices. I'm taking it. Bob is taking it to his job.
Mm-hmm.
It matters, but I don't think it matters if we're not having conversations in a vulnerable way that take however long they take for human beings to really listen to each other.
I don't know that we're not. First, let me make clear that there is a parent company called Project Untitled, and its seminal project was the Untitled Othello project.
Okay.
And Project Untitled is doing the work that it's began to foment and build with the Untitled Othello project on other projects. So we'll go to another school and we'll look at The Tempest. Another school will look at Titus Andronicus. Another school will look at something else, right? And offer these as the starting point to look at any of these projects, right? How do we take the mayonnaise off of this sandwich, right? Because it's not mayonnaise you asked for. It's mayonnaise that 400 years of other people's agendas put there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? How do we take this mayonnaise off and look at it through your lens and my lens in this room, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to call you on stuff that is the patriarchy talking through you, right? If you're a white scholar standing on, well, this means this because so and so and so and so and so and so said so, I'm going to say, do you see how that's controlling? I may look at it and it may mean these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both of us are being human beings, just like these people in the play. It behooves us to, as we're doing this work, to look at ourselves, right, and see where these people look like us. That work can happen with 10 people in the room. It can happen with 30 people in the room. They may not all contribute in the same way, but they're listening. They all have a voice if they want to, especially if we're working all day.
Okay. Okay.
And that's being supported.
Mm-hmm.
What happens for actors, again, if you have in mind that we are theater makers who first come to this thinking, well, let's see if there's a play that we want to put on a stage. So we always have that in the back of our minds. It's okay if we don't, but we have it in the back of our minds. So how have we been trained? How have you and I been trained, Thembi? We've been trained in the American structures that say, you're going to have maybe at this point 5 weeks to rehearse a play, and that's rare.
That's if you're lucky.
You're going to have 3. So make your big choices early, put on that face, and go out there and be the representation of whatever that person is supposed to be. It's never really going to look like that person, because portraying a human takes a whole lot more work than that. They're much more complex than that, right? So without that time, it's always going to be a compromised thing. So my actors come to the table and they say, Desdemona. Oh, okay. I know. I've seen fucking 400 productions of that. I know what that is. Here it is. Some little girl in Ogden, Utah, in a 101 Shakespeare class says to me, I think that Desdemona wants to marry Othello because she believes that he's going to believe that he's lucky to have her. She has all of these white suitors, and they're like coming at her through the patriarchy saying, I've got the money, and you're to be my wife. Your daddy's trading on your beauty and your virginity. I want you. She believes that Othello, because he's the black guy, if she goes with him, is not going to give her the shit that she's going to have to take from white people. He's going to be lucky to have me. I'm a beautiful white girl. And my actors are like, oh shit.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to think of Desdemona that way. That's racist as fuck, but nobody wants to think of her that way, right? She's the one who's like not supposed to be not racist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here's this little high school girl saying,
hold on.
Right?
Yeah.
And the actors who have rushed to put on that Desdemona face are like, I got to think about this. This is going to take some time. So look at all the fruit that these people who have nothing to gain or lose, they don't have a pony in this race. They're like, I'm just going to come in here and tell you the truth. I'm going to tell you what I see, what I think. We're going to figure it out that way. That can go on forever. And the piece never has to be, if in fact you don't decide, okay, we want to stop here because this is nothing that we want to put on stage. If you don't decide that and put something on stage, nothing says it has to be set in stone. It can continue to change. That story can continue to be told with changes and nuance here and there. You could try things, right? You can grow things. That's what the theater is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be Ivo fucking Van Hove says it's this. Give me $200. You got 6 weeks to come in here and give me $200 to see what Ivo Van Hove said this is.
Yeah. And allow the pressure of the surrounding context to tell you, oh, this is what the work is supposed to look like. Oh, is this what? Okay. Wow. I was moved. I was transfixed because you were already told that you were supposed to be transfixed before you got there.
That's right. It has all been taught to you. It has all been suggested to you. And you've been indoctrinated into believing that this is genius. Right?
And so now when you look at anything else that questions that, you've now decided, like the scholar, well, this is genius. So what is this over here? This looks different. So I'm going to look at that with questioning. I'm going to be more skeptical of the value of that because it doesn't look the same. It's not interpreting the text and the images in the same way.
Now, the question is, how do I blow that up, right? How do I take that person and put them in a seat and show them some shit that they're like, yeah, that was different, but I can't say that was like, that's not going to leave my mind, right? That was some shit I've never seen. American Moor did that, which is what freaked people out. This ain't what we're supposed.
You got to be in a certain mind frame to begin with. There has to be a certain level of openness, because if you've already made certain decisions, you're not going to be able to receive it.
So getting back to your earlier question, that can travel, that can go wherever, to whomever wants to be part of that work. Grow it, change it. That's what we're supposed to be doing with this work. It is only set in stone because it serves a bunch of people holding on to and making money. That's all it's ever been. Shakespeare has been emblematic of white excellence because it served white people for it to be that, right? So they were able to shape it to anybody who wanted to, take it to other countries, to colonize other countries. Forget anything that your literature, the literature of your country and your people, that's primitive. Same thing with music. Forget your music, right? The European scales, right? The great masters, right? If it's not Bach, it ain't no good. If it ain't Rembrandt, it ain't no good. This is excellence.
Yeah, this is the yardstick that we measure everything else by.
And Shakespeare was a part of that.
For sure. So you're leveraging it. You're saying, okay, Othello, let's talk about it.
If we can continue, right, if you can garner the money and the support to do that work, right? Because you have to feed. The care and feeding of human beings is intrinsic to making theater, right? And people do it at varying levels. Sometimes it's not very good. The contracts that I have taken over my career, starting with apprenticeships, which were nothing, right? We're paying you in experience, right? and you're going to bust your ass and live like this, right? To even now, right? I'm not going to pay you as much as it costs you to get to rehearsal, but equity says we can do that. These are all manifestations of chattel slavery.
Oh my gosh. That's exactly what I was about to say. I was like, slavery.
It hasn't gone away.
I love that we're on the same page.
It hasn't gone away. Like it is American capitalism. Yeah. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Right?
The devaluation of people in service of this keeping this wheel in motion that doesn't have to exist. But if you're convinced that it has to exist, you'll feed it. You'll put your own bones into the grinder to feed something because you think that you have been convinced, you have been told, and all kinds of things that you see around you confirm for you that it has to exist and there's nothing else but that.
Nothing says that at any point you can't say, all right, enough of Othello. Let's work on this. Let's work on this contemporary play or this contemporary novel. Let's work on whatever. But let's come to the table and hear one another and take the mayonnaise off the sandwich, right? It ain't my mayonnaise. It's somebody else's mayonnaise, right? But it's starting to smell funny.
And the Project Untitled has the methodology. The Untitled Othello project is one particular approach using that methodology, but Project Untitled uses that methodology for a variety of different projects. Yes? Do I have that correct?
Yeah, in essence, Thembi, my sense is that you can untitle anything. It just means let's not assume that whatever somebody else says a thing means is what it means.
Yeah.
Right? Let's not assume that, because usually we can be fairly certain in this culture that there is an agenda behind anybody telling us anything. There is an agenda. How do we find the truth? And how do we speak to it? How do we stay in it? How do we encourage the people who are looking to us for guidance to stay in it? I think a production of Othello that was well funded over a number of years doing this work would be an extraordinary looking thing.
A production that continues, like, are you thinking that the production itself evolves with the conversation? So if I go to see the production in February of 2025 and then I go see it again in October of 2025, you're talking about two different productions.
I think it very well could, right? And that would require all of the people involved to really embrace the idea that we're not holding on to anything. It could all be working perfectly in this moment, and that could change tomorrow based on some post-show discussion with an audience member that says something that's like, it shifts all of this. How do we incorporate that, right? How do we incorporate that awareness?
Who's in charge of the conversation, Keith? Who's in charge of the conversation? Because if you're talking about being able to make a shift if you're talking about, okay, this is going to evolve, who decides what evolutions should happen and how to make them happen? Or does that structure break up as well?
I think the ensemble decides, right? And there is, I mean, this is an ongoing discussion, right? There is an ensemble that is based on the idea of communal creativity, right?
Okay.
Um, shared collaborative authority. We're all in that room trying to figure out what's what. But ultimately, we all know that when you put something on stage, generally communal direction doesn't work,
No.
right?
No.
You need a director, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you need a facilitator in that room to if you're going to use your time at all efficiently, and efficient is a strange term to have to use with this, because if you're imagining that there's endless time, you don't need to be efficient, but there's never endless time. It can be protracted, but there needs to be somebody saying, okay, well, this is not relevant to the discussion we're having right now, so we'll leave that and we'll go over here. And somebody saying, well, no, I want to talk about this thing. I'm saying, okay, but you can't talk about it right now. We need to go this way, but bring it back. I'm not trying to dismiss it. I'm just trying to follow. The group is generally taking a train of thought and trying to follow it wherever, that work has to happen. Ultimately, the ensemble as a group goes to a place where they all understand. There's a brain trust, right? They all understand how everybody else is thinking. Generally, they've worked together long enough to speak the same language and be essentially in agreement with one another with where this has gone. So if you add a whole bunch of new voices, that group would then say, have the discussions along with them. Oh, this person's offering this. I'd like to talk about that because that's interesting. That can take up a day. Let's figure out how this affects Amelia in her trajectory, because she's talking about these things that Amelia would be experiencing. She's talking about intimate partner violence. She's talking about the complicity of the woman in the patriarchal culture, even though she is not, in her heart and in her mind believing with, what the patriarch is saying and asking her to do. And she has this specific experience that she's offering into the room. So I want to talk about that. That all begins to shape the conversation. But the group would generally want to say that has value. Anybody who ultimately thought, I'm not getting anything from this, would leave.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Would
Yeah.
stop doing it. And we've had those.
Okay.
We've had those people. It's just like, I don't, for any number of reasons, I just don't get it. I don't think I'm getting anything from it. So, I'm going to stop. And others who very much have wanted to be in the room and have thrived once being allowed to show up as part of that, right? In a way that they never had before, right? With all prescription removed from how they think about Shakespeare and how they think about and talk about themselves. The joy and satisfaction of being part of a group of people making a thing that is their thing, not dictated by anything but what they bring to it. The Othello project could stop, right? It could stop anytime. We've done a ton of work. There's a ton more that could be done, but it could stop, and we could start with something else. I'm not done with it. I feel like, there's a text now, right? That is still problematic, especially when you get towards the end, towards the second scene of Act 2, where it all culminates in this sort of ridiculous mess of racism and misogyny, which is fine because it's real. I think it's the ham-fistedness of it that Shakespeare employs that messes with me, that it's just too much what the poet assumes these characters would do and how they would be, that don't seem human to me. It seems far more plot driven than character driven. And we're only, we did one several year long close reading of the play to get to where we were. Now we take the text that we've edited and we do a close reading of that. And we get to that fifth act again and see what changes, see what new, what new voices come into the work over the time that we're doing that, what new things we discover, and see if the humanity of these characters acting in their innately human capacities do in this final scene of the play. What do they do? What happens? Montano, the deputy governor of Cyprus, who's governor till Othello gets there, comes in and sees that Othello has killed his wife. And if he's another African-esque soldier, which I think he is, I think he's, I think he's the only other logical place for a Black presence in that play. Like, people like to bring in black bodies. We have a brown-skinned Bianca as well, which is interesting. But the black bodies are not like everybody else. They can't be. The play doesn't make any sense if they are, right? They're not just citizens. You can't just have Black people playing white people. It's dumb. It doesn't take us anywhere. So where are they? Well, if Othello is a mercenary, and he's a mercenary in the same way that Louis XIV hired Swiss guards, right? It's like they would get these Swiss people, these Swiss soldiers to and pay them to guard the king. They were like the elite. They were like SEAL Team 6, and they were the ones they were the go-to. Like, get the Swiss guy. They called them Switzers, or I believe that's what maybe Shakespeare called them that. I don't know if the French called them that. But anyway, what if these Moorish warriors were the equivalent, right? Get these Moorish warriors, because they'll get the shit done.
Okay.
Right? There's a lot of anecdotal stuff around the Tuskegee Airmen, who, when they were finally allowed to enter the war, they flew bomber support. They were the little planes that flew alongside the bomber to protect the bomber from people shooting them down.
Mm-hmm.
And they were really friggin' good at it, right? Because, they knew they had to be. They entered the war and they said, now we have to show that we have this value. So they would do this. And the white bomber pilots would say, yeah, if you're flying in Africa, get those Black guys, because they'll get you home. They will not leave you. They will escort you to your target and home again. And they do it really well. Get those guys. Similarly, if Othello is this Moorish warrior who is from a culture that has hired itself out as, have been discovered as, get these brown guys, and we put them in certain positions where we need shit done. Now, we don't respect them as if they were us. We're not going to give them authority as if they were us, but we're going to, make use of them. So we go to Cyprus, off island, where they've occupied, and you have another Moorish warrior there taking care of business. And this is Montano. That's all backstory. We get to the end of the play, and Montano comes and knocks on the door, and he opens the door and he comes in, and like, the white lady is dead. He's come to say, there's some shit happening out here in the streets. There's some fighting going on. You should pay attention to this. You should come out and do this. And what was interesting when we were looking at that fifth act was that our guy didn't care that she was dead. He's like, okay, yeah, you killed your wife. That's between y'all. She probably did something. I'm here to tell you about, you got some stuff, right? Because that's what we do. Right. This is business. That's between you and, all right, sorry, you cool? Let's go. Mm-hmm. And to depict that makes a statement that, to me, has relevance right now. It may change depending on what somebody offers into this conversation at another point. But right now, that seems right. And somebody looking at that is like, well, what the, shit.
Mm-hmm. Whole different, yeah.
It's that right.
Yeah.
Because that's human.
Okay.
That dude is a human being playing the circumstances.
Yes. But if I'm Jane Doe coming to the show,
mm-hmm.
and I haven't been party to the conversation, to the several years of close reading, am I just looking on the surface? And well, yeah, I would get the answers. Yes, I'm looking at the surface. I'm drawing conclusions. How does the conversation, or does it? I'm answering my own question, I guess. The people who come to see the show, obviously, some of the people who see the show are going to be people who have been in discussion if they're not in the show. But I guess I'm just curious of like the translation to the audience member of that work, right? The way that you just described all of that backstory to me. Now, when I see it, I'm much richer. The reality is we have dramaturgy around work when we can, and we do research and we share things, we make things available to people, and they get to choose whether or not they want to engage with it. And I guess maybe I have this weird obsession with leaving unpacked luggage all over the lobby and all over people's laps when really it's a person's decision whether or not they want to unpack something. And that's okay. That somehow their life is not ruined because they are not unpacking something to the point of emptiness. And maybe the show is the show, and maybe they don't know why that scene resonated with them so much, and maybe it's okay that they don't know why. They don't have to know all of that. They just need to experience it and feel it. And the job that the creators and the artists have done by having this deep discussion in the creation of the piece is enough.
The one thing they know is that it's not like the other 100 renditions of Othello that they've seen. Then they're thinking, why? And if they're inclined to have discussions, they will discover some of the why, because they'll be in discussion with people who are saying, why does that bother you? Why are you still talking about that?
Yeah.
It will create all kinds of situations. I don't know when's the last time I left a production of any Shakespeare play talking about the characters in the play, because it all looks like versions of the same thing. Like we've accepted certain standards that define what this Shakespeare play is supposed to look like and be about. We haven't done as what is her name? I think I mentioned it in our last meeting, Thembi. This scholar who teaches at University of Essex, Nora Williams, who talks about incomplete dramaturgies. If you want the play to mean something, you're going to have to take it apart and break it and put it back together. You're going to have to do the work. You're going to have to explore. If you want to put a trans person in the role of Bianca, you're going to have to do the work that makes that make some kind of sense. You can't just stick them in there, because that will not resonate. That'll be, somebody says, that was a cute trick, right? That was an idea, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean anything. If you want to stick a Black person in the role of Amelia, well, what does that mean? Why would Iago have a Black wife? Why would Iago be a Black guy? That's getting done more and more. The first time I saw it was Shakespeare Theater in D.C. with Andre Braugher and Avery Brooks way back in the day. Now it's become like, it's not clever anymore. It was barely clever then, because you haven't really done that dramaturgy to explain how that works within the context of this play.
And if you do it, it shows up in the work.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. If you do it, it will either disprove that it's a thing to do and you'll stop, or it will show up in the work.
Because I feel like if you're going through with it, I'm hoping that it shows up in the work and it isn't just a cute trick, like you said. Yeah. I love how my brain feels when I talk to you.
I love that. That's wonderful.
You always leave me with more questions than I started with, which is a good thing.
Yeah, well, at least we're asking them, right? That is, I think, the intrinsic problem to all of this that we're living right now. Is nobody's really stopping to talk about it. It takes too long. You can't make any money doing it, and the answers are often inconvenient.
Yeah, because if you find some of them, then you're sitting there like, oh, well, now that I know the answer, I'm knowingly not doing anything about it if I don't. And that's not comfortable. Okay. I'm stopping. KeyBARD is produced, directed, and hosted by Thembi Duncan. Theme music produced by Psycho Sid. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, follow, leave a review, or give us a 5-star rating. Your support helps the show reach more listeners, and it means the world to me. Thank you for listening.